Imagine this. You wake up, grab some coffee, stroll out to check your apple orchard, and boom, half your farm has been bulldozed. Not by nature, not by accident, but by your HOA president who apparently thought she was auditioning for Extreme Makeover Suburban Edition. Oh, and here's the plot twist. The farmer she just steamrolled, he's the government official who approves building permits. Yeah, buckle up, because this HOA saga is juicier than a fresh-picked Granny Smith. Every neighborhood has one. That one person who looks at a perfectly fine community and thinks, you know what this needs? My personal brand of visionary chaos. In Maple Valley, that person was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Now, most HOA presidents are content with arguing over mailbox colors or whether someone's grass is a quarter-inch too tall. Not Karen. No, she thought on a bigger scale. Her dream wasn't just about power, it was about building her legacy. And her legacy, in her mind, was a luxury resort. Yep, you heard that right, a resort. Picture this, manicured lawns swapped out for tiki torches, a pool with imported tiles, a day spa where suburbanites could find themselves, and maybe even a golf simulator for good measure. It wasn't just an idea. It was her grand plan to beautify the community. And if you rolled your eyes just now, congratulations, you're already smarter than Karen. The thing is, Karen didn't just keep this as a fantasy on a Pinterest board. She started whispering it in HOA meetings. Imagine the property values, she said, waving her hands dramatically like she was unveiling a new iPhone. She promised neighbors that a resort would bring glamour, prestige, and maybe even make their humble cul-de-sac the next Palm Springs. Some people nodded politely, others checked their watches, but Karen? She thought she had buy-in. And here's where delusion turns into comedy. The land she had in her sights wasn't some unused patch of dirt or a forgotten lot. It was a fully functioning apple farm, you know, with trees, with crops, with an actual farmer who depended on it for his livelihood. It had been in the community longer than the HOA itself, but in Karen's mind, that didn't matter. After all, apples don't boost property values. Pools do. This is where the entitlement really shines. Karen convinced herself that HOA bylaws somehow gave her the authority to do whatever she pleased. She believed that community improvement was a blank check she could cash however she wanted, never mind property deeds, counting lines, or little things like basic law. She saw farmland and thought, oh good, a blank canvas for my empire. Let's pause here for some perspective. Most HOA disputes are about things like paint shades or garden gnomes. Imagine being so wildly out of touch that instead of nitpicking about shutters, you jump straight to bulldozing an orchard. That's not a jump, that's an Olympic-level leap into absurdity. And to make it worse, Karen wasn't even subtle. She bragged about her plans, told people how much better the community would look once those unsightly apple trees were gone, as if rows of healthy fruit were somehow an eyesore compared to her fantasy cabana. She pitched it as if she were doing everyone a favor. Think of the prestige, she kept saying, but what she really meant was, think of how important this makes me look. The farmer, of course, was not consulted, because why would he be? In Karen's world, the farm was already hers, at least in spirit, and that arrogance was about to set the stage for one of the most hilariously catastrophic HOA wars in suburban history. Because here's the thing about delusions of grandeur, they don't stay on PowerPoint slides forever. At some point, someone like Karen takes action, and when she did, let's just say she went from dreamer to destroyer faster than you can say cease and desist. So what happens when a woman with a clipboard, a fantasy, and way too much free time decides to make her dream resort a reality? She calls in the big guns, or in this case, the big machines. Welcome to fact number 2, bulldozer madness.
Now, if you thought Karen's resort vision was just hot air and HOA meeting theatrics, you're giving her too much credit. Because while most of us would jot an idea like that down in a journal labeled, "Do not attempt," Karen decided to skip the brainstorming stage entirely and jump straight to the demolition phase. Enter the bulldozers. Yes, actual bulldozers. We're not talking about some metaphorical, she bulldozed through the bylaws nonsense. No, Karen literally rented heavy machinery to plow through a man's apple orchard. Imagine the audacity it takes to not only dream of replacing an orchard with a poolside resort, but to actually say, you know what? Let's call in construction equipment this weekend and start early. That's not leadership. That's lunacy with a diesel engine. So here's how it went down. Early one Saturday morning, while most people were out grabbing coffee or mowing their lawns, Karen's hired crew rolled up with bulldozers like they were storming Normandy. Neighbors stood slack-jawed as rows of apple trees, carefully nurtured over years, got flattened in minutes. The rumble of engines drowned out birdsong, and the crunch of splintering wood replaced the gentle rustle of leaves. And let's not forget, these weren't just trees, they were the farmer's livelihood. Each apple tree represented seasons of pruning, harvesting, and backbreaking work. To him, they weren't just crops, they were his life's investment. But to Karen, they were in the way, like weeds she could just rip out to make room for her dream spa retreat. Here's where it gets comical, in a tragic sort of way. Karen didn't even have permission. No permits, no contracts, no ownership of the land she was destroying. She just assumed her position as HOA president was like holding the infinity gauntlet of property rights. Snap her fingers, and voila, private land transformed into communal paradise. Except reality doesn't work like that, and neither do bulldozers. And the kicker? She didn't try to hide it. Nope, she strutted around the demolition site in sunglasses and a sun hat, giving directions like some sort of suburban general. One neighbor swore she even said, "This will double our property values," as apple trees fell around her. Double the values? Lady, you just turned farmland into a wasteland. That doesn't scream resort chic. That screams lawsuit incoming. So really grasp the absurdity here. Imagine if someone strolled into your backyard, tore down your fence, and declared, "Congratulations, we're putting in a community tennis court. You'll thank me later." That's the level of delusion we're talking about. Only this wasn't a fence, it was an entire working orchard. Neighbors, horrified, pulled out their phones. Video after video captured Karen's bulldozer parade. And you better believe those clips went viral faster than you can say, "Karen strikes again." Suddenly, it wasn't just a neighborhood issue, it was a town spectacle. People started driving by just to gawk at the audacity. And the farmer? He stood there in disbelief, watching years of work get flattened by a woman who thought she was starring in Property Brothers Dictator Edition. But here's where karma starts to hum a little tune in the background. Because while Karen thought she was finally realizing her dream, she had no idea whose toes she was stepping on. She thought she was fighting some small-town farmer with no power, but in reality, she had just bulldozed her way into a showdown with the one person in the county she should never, ever mess with. Because that helpless farmer whose trees she just leveled, he wasn't some nobody. He was the guy who held the keys to every construction project in town. And when Karen realized who she had messed with, it wasn't just a twist, it was poetic justice. Welcome to fact number 3, the man with the permits.
Here's where the plot takes the kind of twist that makes you want to grab popcorn. Karen thought she was going toe-to-toe with some small-town farmer whose biggest flex was owning a tractor and a plaid shirt. What she didn't know, and what makes this story so delicious, is that the farmer wasn't just Farmer Joe. He was the county's permit officer. That's right. The guy whose job was to stamp yes or denied on every single construction project in the region. Let that sink in. Karen bulldozed his apple farm to build a resort, and now she needed his signature to make her resort legal. That's like robbing a bank only to discover the teller you shoved is also the sheriff. Or like cheating off someone's test only to find out they're the teacher grading it. You cannot write irony this good. For years, this man had quietly balanced 2 lives. By day, county permit officer. By evenings and weekends, apple farmer. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He knew zoning laws like the back of his hand, and he took pride in both jobs. His orchard produced cider sold at the local farmers market, and his office ensured developments followed the rules. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but when Karen bulldozed his farm, she turned him from quiet bureaucrat into the ultimate final boss. Imagine Karen's face when she found out. She's at an HOA meeting, waving around glossy resort brochures, bragging about how the pool will increase community prestige, when someone whispers, you know the farmer you bulldozed, he's the permit officer. Her smug smile probably cracked right down the middle like a poorly baked pie crust. Because suddenly, her entire empire of tiki torches and day spas depended on the man whose livelihood she had destroyed. Every blueprint she filed, he would see. Every zoning request, he had the final say. And guess what? He wasn't exactly in a mood to fast-track her fantasy resort. And here's where the humor really kicks in. Karen, for all her arrogance, had clearly never considered how the world actually works. She assumed being HOA president made her untouchable, like she had the suburban equivalent of diplomatic immunity. But the real power wasn't in her clipboard. It was in his stamp. And when he started stamping "denied" on her paperwork, it was like a symphony of karma. The permit officer didn't even need to be vengeful. All he had to do was his job, by the book. And by the book, Karen's project was a flaming pile of nope. No legal land acquisition, no environmental approval, no community consent. Her resort wasn't just impossible, it was laughable. And the farmer? Oh, he played it cool. He didn't rant or rave. He just showed up to meetings calm, collected, and armed with binders full of evidence. Land deeds proving ownership, tax records showing decades of payments, and now video footage of bulldozers trespassing on his property. The kind of evidence that makes lawyers salivate and HOA presidents sweat. At this point, neighbors began to whisper. The story spread like wildfire. Karen bulldozed the permit guy's farm. It sounded like the setup to a bad sitcom, but it was real life. And it didn't take long for the community to realize she hadn't just overstepped, she had detonated her own credibility. Karen wanted to be remembered as the visionary who transformed Maple Valley into a luxury paradise. Instead, she was becoming infamous as the woman who bulldozed the wrong farm. Her legacy wasn't palm trees and spas. It was memes, whispers, and soon-to-be lawsuits. And as if it wasn't bad enough that Karen picked the fight with the one man who could legally block her dreams, she tried to dig herself out with excuses. Spoiler, those excuses didn't just flop. They made her look even more ridiculous. When you get caught red-handed bulldozing someone's apple farm without permission, you've basically got two options: apologize and pray, or double down with excuses that make everyone in the room question your grasp on reality. And of course, Karen picked option number 2. Because what's an HOA Karen without a buffet of excuses so flimsy they'd snap under a light breeze? Her first excuse? Oh, I thought the land was community property. Excuse me? Since when does community property mean land I can bulldoze for my spa dream? Community property in HOA terms usually means sidewalks, mail kiosks, or maybe a sad strip of grass nobody wants to mow, not an entire privately owned apple orchard that's been in the farmer's family for decades. If Karen really believed that, then she probably also thought the White House lawn was up for grabs if she wanted to build a Starbucks drive-thru. But wait, it gets better. Her second excuse was the classic, I was beautifying the neighborhood. Beautifying? Lady, you didn't plant flowers. You brought in bulldozers like it was a demolition derby. That's not beautification. That's vandalism with a vision board. If tearing up working farmland counts as beautification, then I guess spray painting over someone's garage door could be called urban art therapy. The farmer, meanwhile, didn't have to raise his voice. He had receipts, property deeds going back 30 years, tax records with his name on them, even aerial photos showing the orchard thriving long before Karen's resort fantasy ever invaded the HOA minutes. The more Karen tried to spin, the more she tangled herself in her own nonsense. And then came her third and possibly most entertaining excuse. It was for the good of the community. Now, I don't know about you, but I've yet to meet a community whose number one concern was not enough poolside cabanas. What about noise complaints, parking issues, rising HOA dues? Nope, according to Karen, all of that was irrelevant compared to the urgent need for a luxury resort
plopped on stolen farmland. You have to admire the audacity, if not the logic. Neighbors weren't buying it either. At first, the few had nodded along when she painted the dream of tiki torches and saunas. But once the truth came out, that she'd bulldozed land that wasn't hers, lied about ownership, and tried to pass it off as community improvement, those same neighbors started whispering behind her back. Some even started openly criticizing her in meetings, pointing out the obvious. If she'll bulldoze his land today, what's to stop her from bulldozing my backyard tomorrow? By this point, Karen's credibility was crumbling faster than the orchard she flattened. And still, she kept talking. She reminded everyone that she was the HOA president, as if her title somehow gave her the authority of a Supreme Court justice. But here's the thing about titles. They don't protect you from reality. And reality was staring her down in the form of the very man she'd wronged. The farmer with the permits, the receipts, and now a growing pile of legal ammo. Karen thought she could explain her way out of this. Instead, her excuses just added fuel to the fire. She wasn't coming across as visionary anymore. She looked desperate, cornered, and completely out of her depth. And if you thought her excuses were laughable, just wait, because the farmer wasn't just sitting quietly while she spun fairy tales. He had something Karen couldn't bulldoze: actual authority. And when he pulled rank, her resort dreams didn't just stall, they got stamped into oblivion. Welcome to fact number 5, permit power activated.
By now, Karen had painted herself into the HOA Hall of Shame. She bulldozed someone else's apple farm, got caught, and then tried to spin it with excuses so weak they wouldn't hold up in a game of Monopoly. But here's where karma stopped politely waiting in line and strutted right into the HOA meeting wearing steel-toed boots. Because the farmer she thought she could steamroll wasn't just a farmer. He was the permit officer. And folks, when the man who controls every construction green light in the county also happens to be the guy you bulldozed, let's just say things don't go your way anymore. Picture Karen showing up with her glossy resort proposal binder, strutting into the county office like she's about to seal the deal on her suburban Shangri-La. She probably rehearsed her pitch in the mirror. Imagine the prestige. Imagine the property values. Imagine the HOA president who made it happen. But across the desk sat the farmer, calm as ever, wearing the faintest smile that said, "I've been waiting for this moment." And then came the first stamp. Denied. Her spa application? Denied. Her pool request? Denied. The cabana permit? Denied so hard it practically echoed. Every piece of paper she pushed forward came sliding back with a big fat rejection. Why? Because the law was on the farmer's side. Karen had bulldozed land she didn't own, submitted plans without legal rights to the property, and ignored every zoning requirement in the book. He didn't even need to make it personal. The facts alone made her project as dead as the apple tree she destroyed. But you and I both know it was personal. And oh, did he savor every second of watching her squirm. The neighbors began to catch on quickly. They'd been promised a luxury resort, but what they got was a spectacle of denial stamps piling up like confetti. Karen tried to spin it again, claiming the county was against community growth or that she was being targeted unfairly. But everyone knew the truth. She'd picked a fight with the one guy in the county you don't mess with, the guy with the power to turn dreams into dust with a single stamp. And here's the beautiful irony. Karen wanted to be remembered as a visionary. Instead, she became a cautionary tale. Developers, contractors, even other HOAs started whispering, "Did you hear about the president who bulldozed the permit officer's farm?" It spread like wildfire, turning her prestige project into a punchline at real estate mixers. Meanwhile, the farmer wasn't just playing defense. He was meticulous. Every denial letter was backed with statutes, regulations, and citations so ironclad they could be used as doorstops. He wasn't just saying no. He was writing an entire legal dissertation on why her project was toast. And Karen? Oh, she wasn't giving up quietly. She showed up to more meetings, waving her arms, demanding reconsideration. She tried lobbying the board. She even hinted at bringing in investors who would force the county's hand. But every road she took led back to the same man. And every time, he stamped denied, with the quiet satisfaction of someone avenging both his orchard
and his sanity. By now, the whole thing was becoming comical. Neighbors joked that Karen should build a papier-mâché resort out of all her denied applications. At least then, one quipped, she'll finally get her pool. Even the HOA board members who once backed her started distancing themselves. Because let's face it, nothing screams bad leadership like trying to bulldoze the one guy who controls all the bulldozers legally. But if you think Karen took her mountain of denied permits as a sign to sit down and quit, think again. She went nuclear, filing lawsuits, pointing fingers, and trying to flip the narrative. And that brings us to fact number 6, legal fireworks.
If Karen had any sense of self-preservation, this is the point where she would have taken the mountain of denied permits, swallowed her pride, and quietly disappeared into HOA obscurity. But nope, Karen wasn't about to let reality stop her. Instead, she reached for her next weapon, lawsuits. Because when in doubt, why not try suing the very person you bulldozed? Yes, you heard that right. Karen filed a lawsuit against the farmer, the county permit officer, accusing him of interfering with community development. Let's pause here for a collective laugh. Interfering? He wasn't interfering, he was literally doing his job, which last I checked includes stopping lunatics from bulldozing private farmland without permission. That's not interference, that's Tuesday at the office. Her legal filing read like a soap opera script. She claimed the farmer was abusing his position, that he had personal bias against her, and that he was preventing the community from reaching its full potential. Translation, he didn't rubber stamp my illegal resort project, and now I'm mad. If lawyers gave out Oscars for unintentional comedy, Karen would have taken home Best Actress. The farmer, meanwhile, responded with the legal equivalent of a mic drop, a countersuit. His case wasn't just solid, it was bulletproof. He had video evidence of the bulldozers trespassing, he had land deeds proving ownership, he had financial records showing the lost income from destroyed crops, and he had half the neighborhood ready to testify about Karen's resort fantasies. You couldn't script a stronger case if you tried. And oh, the damages. The farmer demanded compensation for the orchard, legal fees, and emotional distress caused by Karen's reckless actions. If Karen thought she'd drain his wallet, she was in for a rude awakening. She was the one writing checks, and they were big. The courtroom showdown was pure theater. Karen strutted in like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on community leadership. She wagged her finger, raised her voice, and tried to paint herself as the hero of the neighborhood. But the judge wasn't buying it. Every time she spun a tale, the farmer's lawyer calmly produced documents that flattened her argument faster than the bulldozers had flattened his orchard. At one point, Karen tried to argue that the farmer should have spoken up sooner if he didn't want his land destroyed. Excuse me? Since when is it the burden on the property owner to warn people not to bring in heavy machinery uninvited? What was she expecting? A sign on the orchard that said, "Please don't bulldoze without asking"? The courtroom chuckled. Karen fumed. The judge scowled. By the time the gavel came down, Karen's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. Legal speak for, don't even think about bringing this nonsense back. And the farmer's countersuit? Moving forward, with Karen now staring down the barrel of potentially thousands in damages. She walked in, hoping to come out a hero. She walked out with her reputation scorched and her bank account about to go on life support. And let's not forget the court of public opinion. The neighbors who once humored her resort fantasies now saw her for what she was, a liability. Whispers turned into open criticism. Parents swapped HOA horror stories at bus stops. Contractors blacklisted her. Even rival HOAs used her meltdown as a training exercise. Don't be like Karen, ever. And if losing in court wasn't humiliating enough, Karen had another problem brewing. The same neighbors she promised a glamorous resort, they were done with her. And when a neighborhood turns on an HOA president, it's not pretty. That's where fact number 7, neighborhood uprising, comes in. If Karen thought her problems ended with denied permits and a humiliating court smackdown, she hadn't been paying attention. Because while she was busy juggling bulldozers, lawsuits, and excuses that made less sense than a soap opera plot twist,
Her neighbors were taking notes. And by the time the dust settled, the people she claimed to represent were sharpening their pitchforks. Metaphorically, of course. Though, honestly, in this neighborhood, I wouldn't rule out a literal pitchfork or two. Let's rewind a little. Remember how Karen originally sold the resort idea to the community? She pitched it as a glamorous upgrade. Think of the property values. Think of the prestige. Think of cocktail nights by the pool. At first, some folks were intrigued. Who doesn't like the idea of amenities? But after the truth came out, that she bulldozed land she didn't own, lied about its status, and dragged the neighborhood into lawsuits, those same folks felt duped. What was supposed to be a prestige project turned into the HOA equivalent of a dumpster fire. And the thing about neighbors is they talk. At barbecues, on morning walks, at the bus stop, the Karen disaster became the community's favorite topic. Did you hear she actually called the orchard community property? Can you believe she thought she could sue the permit officer? The gossip wasn't just juicy, it was unifying. People who'd barely spoken to each other before now bonded over a common cause, getting rid of Karen. Petitions started circulating. At first, they were whispered about in driveways, passed around quietly, but soon they gained momentum. Neighbors signed not just out of annoyance, but out of fear. Fear of what Karen might try next. After all, if she could bulldoze a farm without permission, what was to stop her from declaring someone's backyard perfect for community pickleball courts? The paranoia was real, and it fueled the uprising. HOA board meetings, once sleepy affairs filled with yawns and coffee refills, turned into battlegrounds. Residents showed up in record numbers, demanding accountability. Voices rose, fingers pointed. Karen tried to maintain control, banging her little gavel like it was Thor's hammer, but nobody was listening anymore. Her authority had crumbled, and every attempt to assert it only made her look more desperate. And here's the delicious irony. The very property values Karen had promised to boost, they started to sink. Realtors whispered to potential buyers, "Oh, this is that neighborhood, the one with the bulldozer HOA scandal." Suddenly, the dream resort that was supposed to elevate everyone's homes was dragging their reputations through the mud. Nothing gets suburbanites riled up faster than messing with their resale value, and Karen had single-handedly become the neighborhood's biggest liability. Neighbors began to openly mock her. Memes circulated in group chats, photos of bulldozers with captions like, "Karen's landscaping service, we don't ask, we just flatten." One family even put up a Halloween display featuring a toy bulldozer parked in fake apple trees with a sign that read, "Resort coming soon." It was petty. It was glorious. It was HOA justice in its purest form. And while the laughter was brutal, the anger was worse. Families who'd lived peacefully in Maple Valley for decades now dreaded every HOA notice, every email, every meeting. Karen wasn't just embarrassing them, she was exhausting them. And people don't stay passive when exhaustion turns into resentment. They organize. The final straw came when the petition to remove her hit a majority. It wasn't just a few disgruntled residents anymore. It was the neighborhood, unified in their mission to dethrone their self-appointed resort queen. Karen had become the common enemy, and nothing bonds people faster than the desire to oust a tyrant. And just when Karen thought things couldn't possibly get worse, the farmer decided to twist the knife a little deeper. Because being permit officer came with one last devastating power, the ability to ban her from building anything ever again. Welcome to Fact 8, the ban hammer.
If Karen thought losing her neighbor's trust was bad, she hadn't yet felt the sting of true poetic justice. Because while angry petitions and meme-filled group chats are satisfying, they don't have the kind of finality Karen really deserved. That honor belonged to the farmer, the same man whose orchard she flattened, whose livelihood she endangered, and whose job title was basically keeper of all construction dreams.
And now he was ready to play his trump card, the ban hammer. See, as the county's permit officer, this man didn't need to yell. He didn't need to rant. He didn't even need to throw Karen's gavel across the room. All he had to do was quietly, calmly, and oh so legally blacklist her. And that's exactly what he did. From that day forward, every single permit application with Karen's name attached to it, automatically denied. Every plan, every beautification project, every desperate attempt at a comeback, gone before it ever had a chance to leave his desk. And here's the best part. It wasn't personal. Well, okay, maybe it was a little personal, but mostly it was procedural. Karen had bulldozed without permission, lied about property ownership, and tried to strong-arm the county. By the book, she was now a walking red flag. In bureaucratic language, that's called a risk. In normal people language, it's called, don't let her anywhere near heavy machinery ever again. Imagine Karen marching into the county office, binder in hand, hoping to sneak in a new project. Maybe she thought if she changed the name from resort to community recreation center, she could outsmart the system. Spoiler, she couldn't. The permit officer didn't even need to open the binder. He just stamped denied and slid it back across the desk with the kind of calm satisfaction only karma can deliver. And it didn't stop there. Contractors in town got the memo. Working with Karen was career suicide. Developers avoided her like she was radioactive. Even landscapers politely declined her calls. Her reputation was so torched that if she asked someone to mow her lawn, they'd probably check the zoning laws first. The HOA board, meanwhile, was in shambles. They tried to distance themselves, claiming they had no idea Karen was going rogue with bulldozers and resort blueprints. But the truth was out, and every denial letter that landed on Karen's desk was another nail in the coffin of her so-called leadership. She was no longer the HOA president who promised prestige. She was the HOA cautionary tale, the woman who bulldozed an apple farm and got bulldozed by bureaucracy in return. And the neighbors? Oh, they loved it. Every time Karen whined about being treated unfairly, they grinned. Because this wasn't unfair. This was balance. This was justice, wrapped up in county regulations and stamped in red ink. It was karma with a paper trail, and they got front row seats to the show. Let's be real. Karen thought power came from titles, from clipboards, from waving her HOA gavel like it was a scepter. But real power, it was in the quiet, steady hands of the man she underestimated. The farmer didn't need theatrics. He had the law, and the law said, Karen, you're done. And if you think the ban hammer was the end of Karen's nightmare, think again. Because while the permits were denied and the bulldozers silenced, the damage to her reputation was only beginning. And once your neighbors turn you into the community punchline, there's no coming back. Welcome to fact number 9, reputation in ruins.
If you thought Karen's bulldozer stunt, court smackdowns, and the ban hammer of eternal permit denial were the finale of this suburban soap opera, oh no, we're just getting to the part where the credits roll with bloopers, because nothing lasts longer than an HOA president's ruined reputation, especially in a neighborhood where gossip spreads faster than Wi-Fi. At first, Karen thought she could spin it. She strutted into HOA meetings, insisting she was misunderstood and that her vision was too big for small minds. She told anyone who would listen that the farmer, the permit officer she bulldozed, was abusing his power to make her look bad. But here's the thing. You don't need help looking bad when you've already bulldozed half an orchard without permission and dragged the entire community into lawsuits. Karen didn't look misunderstood. She looked like the neighborhood's cautionary tale. And boy, did the neighbors take that to heart. Suburban moms at bus stops whispered about her between sips of iced coffee. Joggers slowed down just to gossip about the HOA president who thought she owned the county. Even real estate agents got in on it, warning prospective buyers.
This is the neighborhood where the HOA president tried to build a resort on stolen land. Talk about a sales pitch killer. Karen went from wannabe visionary to meme material practically overnight. Pictures of toy bulldozers parked in sandboxes popped up with captions like, "Karen was here." Someone even designed a t-shirt for the annual block party with an apple on the front and the words, "Resorts are for Vegas, not Maple Valley." It sold out in minutes. And then came the local press. Small-town papers love nothing more than a scandal with a colorful villain, and Karen gave them all the material they needed. Headlines screamed, "HOA president bulldozes apple orchard for illegal resort," and "Permit officer denies resort after HOA president bulldozes his land." Local radio hosts roasted her daily, calling her Bulldozer Barbie and Queen Karen of the cul-de-sac. What she thought would make her famous did make her famous, just not in the way she wanted. Meanwhile, inside the HOA, the board was imploding. Members who once clapped politely at her vision speeches now scrambled to distance themselves. One even resigned mid-meeting, declaring, "I didn't sign up to bulldoze apple trees." The board scrambled to rewrite rules, instituting emergency bylaws to prevent any one president from having that much unchecked power again. Karen wasn't just out of favor, she was radioactive. And her reputation didn't stop at the neighborhood. Contractors and developers started turning her down flat. She called for estimates on landscaping, pool construction, even basic maintenance, and got nothing but polite refusals. Word had spread. Working with Karen was professional suicide. If she couldn't even get someone to mow her lawn without it turning into a liability, what chance did she have of building a prestigious resort? Neighbors stopped waving. Parents pulled their kids away when she walked by. Even the community Facebook page banned her after one too many rants about visionaries being persecuted. It was social exile, 21st century edition. And if you think that didn't sting Karen, you underestimate how much HOA presidents live for attention. Her once prized gavel, a running joke. Kids in the neighborhood banged sticks against fences and shouted, "Order! Order!" every time she walked by. She had become the villain in her own HOA fairy tale, except instead of a dramatic redemption arc, she was stuck in suburban purgatory with no allies, no power, and no bulldozers. But while Karen's reputation smoldered in ruins, the farmer was busy writing the story's finale. And trust me, it was sweeter than any apple pie. Because what started with destruction ended with renewal, and a victory nobody saw coming. Welcome to fact number 10, Apples and Justice Served.
Every good HOA war needs a finale. The kind where the villain collapses under the weight of their own arrogance and the hero walks away, not just victorious, but thriving. And in Maple Valley, that finale came not with bulldozers or lawsuits, but with apples. Sweet, crisp, justice-flavored apples. After months of chaos, court battles, and enough gossip to power the neighborhood group chat for a decade, the farmer finally got to do what he did best: rebuild. With community support pouring in, the apple orchard came back to life. Neighbors who had once kept quiet now rolled up their sleeves to help replant. Kids volunteered to water new saplings. Families spent weekends hauling soil, rebuilding fences, and restoring what Karen's bulldozers had destroyed. The orchard wasn't just farmland anymore. It was a symbol, proof that resilience beats arrogance every single time. And oh, the irony! Karen had promised a resort that would bring the community together. But in the end, it was the fight against her madness that actually united them. The apple farm, once just another piece of the landscape, became the neighborhood's pride. Every blossom that bloomed was a reminder that no HOA president, no matter how power-drunk, could bulldoze the heart of a community. The farmer, of course, wasn't just rebuilding trees. He was rebuilding his reputation, too. Though, let's be honest, it didn't need much rebuilding. If anything, his legend grew. He wasn't just the quiet man with apples anymore. He was the permit officer who said no, the hero who took down Karen with nothing but paperwork, patience, and a healthy dose of karma. At community gatherings, neighbors shook his hand like he'd just won a championship. Kids called him the Apple Sheriff. Even rival HOAs whispered his name with awe. And what about Karen? Well, let's just say she didn't get an invite to the orchard's grand reopening. While families laughed, children played, and the farmer unveiled the first batch of cider from the replanted trees, Karen was nowhere to be seen. Her once loyal supporters had moved on. Her clipboard collected dust. Her grand legacy was reduced to a punchline and a pile of denied permits. She wasn't the queen of Maple Valley anymore. She was the ghost of a bad decision, forever remembered as the woman who bulldozed an orchard and bulldozed her own reputation with it. But here's the sweetest part. The farmer turned the whole ordeal into an opportunity. The community began hosting an annual apple festival on the land, complete with music, games, and cider tastings. It wasn't just about apples. It was about celebrating resilience. And every year the story was retold. Remember when Karen tried to build a resort here? Look at it now. The laughter echoed louder than any resort karaoke night ever could. Even the local press circled back. Headlines shifted from scandal to redemption. Orchard rebuilt after HOA dispute becomes symbol of community unity. The farmer smiled in photos, holding baskets of apples with kids running behind him. And Karen? Well, she was relegated to a one-line mention. Former HOA president, unavailable for comment. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the universe chuckling. Karen wanted tiki bars and cabanas. What she got was humiliation, lawsuits, and a permanent ban on permits. What the farmer got, though, was far richer. A stronger orchard, a stronger community, and the satisfaction of watching karma do its job better than any bulldozer ever could. So the next time an HOA president starts talking about beautifying the neighborhood, maybe ask, beautifying for who? Because in Maple Valley, one Karen's bulldozer dream turned into the neighborhood's biggest joke and one farmer's sweetest victory. If you loved this tale of bulldozers, apples, and HOA karma served cold, smash that like button, subscribe to HOA Wars, and tell me in the comments, what's the wildest HOA story you've ever heard? Bonus points if it involves heavy machinery.